every day. Time no day, so every day. If you see what happened today, I come. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Home Notes. My name is Oluwashayo Olowoake, and today I am joined by Mr. Kola Tubosun. How are you doing, Mr. Kola? It's nice to talk to you.
I'm doing well. Just call me Kola. Thank you.
Oh, okay, Kola. Okay, sure. um, so can you tell me a bit about yourself and your practice?
Okay. My name is Kola Tubosun. I am a writer and a linguist. For the better part of the last 20 years, this is how I've introduced myself. And then last year, I think I added a new appellation. I grudgingly call myself a documentary maker now, documentary filmmaker. But mostly I'm a writer and I'm a linguist. My work, traverses those two spaces. I do writing, I do linguistics. I've been a teacher. I've done a couple of other things, but writer and linguist typically covers most of what I do.
I also read somewhere that you're an avid book collector. So I wanted to
Yes.
ask you, what books hold a special place in your library?
There's a number of them. The first time I got a copy of Black Orpheus, I was so excited. This was about 4 or 5 years ago, and before they became really, inordinately expensive. And now I have a whole collection of them, all the editions that have been published, and those hold a very special place in my heart. Sometime last year also, I found someone that had a hardbound copy of most of the first editions of Black Orpheus. So during the time they were being published, they had this thing they call Kraus Prints, which is a New York-based publisher that looked at historical material that are published and then republished them. So they did this thing where they bound all of them into like three hard copy editions. So I do have that, and I'm very proud of it. I have a couple of original first edition work by Christopher Okigbo. I'm proud of that. I have some uncorrected copies of Chinua Achebe's work, Arrow of God, I think, and the Things Fall Apart, I believe, and maybe one of the other ones. And so I have a couple, mostly first edition original African writings, African literature publications.
Oh, wow. Do you ever, just side question, do you ever read the first edition and then have later editions of the same copy and
Oh,
kind of
yes.
compare?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes, I do that. I think for Chimamanda's Half of a Yellow Sun, I think I must have about 3 or 4 different versions of the book.
Yeah.
Bami Adebayo's book as well. I had the first draft book.
Wow.
The last one she published, I can't remember the title now. And I also have, later editions. Sometimes I just take them for the value of the cover.
Yeah.
And sometimes I take, what's it called? I buy translated editions. So this is Ake, Years of Childhood, Wole Soyinka. This is the German edition. I like the cover.
Yeah.
And I'm also, because I'm a linguist, I'm interested in languages and how people, move words from one language and culture to another. So I tend to collect copies of translations as well.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And would you, in terms of Nigerian literature now specifically, what books would you say, in your opinion, are underexplored in the sense of recognizing the role they played at the time that they were first published, in the role they played in shaping society? So let's say if you think people are not as aware, or I don't know.
Well, everybody knows about Things Fall Apart. And when you read the review when it was first published, they were kind of okay, tentative. Many people liked them. Some people were like, this is interesting, this is weird. Nobody could have thought at then that it would become, this globally recognized writing. I think it was first editions were 2,000 copies or so. And now they've been translated into almost 50 or 100 languages. I think this book by Amos Tutuola, Palm Wine Drinkard, was also quite interesting because the first reviews were terrible. Everybody hated most Africans hated the English. Like, this is broken English. Why are Oyimbos publishing this? Are they trying to say this is how we write? And then it's become a classic of, African writing. So I find it quite interesting. So there are a number of books like that that sometimes have initial hype and fizzle out. Sometimes they have initial, ambivalence, and then they become really interesting work.
Yeah.
There are a couple more like that. Yeah.
Okay. Now moving on to Olongo Africa.
Yes.
Can you talk to me about the process of founding that? What was the motivation and your process to get into this point?
Okay. So Olongo Africa came by chance, really. In 2019, I had I'd already had like maybe almost 10 years of working in African literature. Sorry if you hear my son babbling, don't worry
Oh,
about
it's
it.
all right.
So I've had about 10 years of African literature engagement, interviewed a number of writers, done reviews, done all these things, edited a literary magazine. I was already getting tired actually of the space. It wasn't as interesting anymore to me, but I wanted to like put many of the things I'd worked on, publish them, put them in print, but also encourage new people who were beginning to come up. So I didn't know what I was going to do. So that came and went. And then in 2019, I got a fellowship opportunity to go to the British Library to work for 1 year and a Chevening Research Fellowship. So I went there in 2019, September. And the pandemic started later that year. And by March, it had become really bad that I had to leave the UK. The fellowship continued, of course, but I was in Nigeria at the time. So I was a little idle. I was restless. I wanted to do a number of things. And then a friend of mine, a colleague, Maria Bustillos, who I had worked with at Popula magazine, suggested this idea. I think during the pandemic, people just had different ideas of how do we move things forward. The world has changed. How do we adapt to the new world coming? So she suggested all of us creating about like 8 or 9 of us. Let's create this huge collective where each person would bring their own publication and we'll form what we call the Brick House Collective Cooperative. And the idea is that all of you are publishing independently, but you also have a big cooperative together that can help you get grants or support whatever it is you're doing. So I had to come up with the name of my own part of the organization. So I was thinking a lot about, it was really a high pressure moment because we had to come up with it pretty quickly. So I thought of Olongo. Olongo is a name of a bird, popular bird in Yoruba, but also the name of a magazine that Lolashinen used to run in Ibadan very many years ago. Many people don't know about it. I think it was called Olongo Magazine, Olongo something. I can't remember. I had a few copies of it. This was many years ago, 2000 or so. So I thought, okay, Olongo Africa is a nice idea. So I wrote to her and said, I have to name a publication. I know that you used to have an Olongo a long time ago. I hope you don't mind me using Olongo Africa. She said she doesn't mind. Okay, so I sent Olongo Africa. So that was it. It became publication. We raised about $90,000, I think, that year. And we distributed it among the 8 of us. And we were supposed to just use it for whatever it is. We are independent publications. And then you can do whatever you want to do. If you need help with the collective, you ask. If you don't, you can keep going. So we started, we had a managing editor. I brought in Jide Salau, and we just crafted ideas of what we do with this publication. And then we said, okay, well, in this space, there are some new magazines doing different things. We wanted to do something else that's not the same thing as everybody's doing. I wanted to make sure translations was part of it. We encouraged a lot of publishing in local languages or translating into English. But we also wanted to publish new voices in journalism, in poetry, in drama, in all those things, and reviews. And so that was what we did. So for the first year, we did all of that. And second year, we did that. And then, that's what we've been doing since. Eventually, the funding dried up. So we had to find new ways to continue the work. So Brick House Cooperative, at this time, we had reduced to like 5 people remaining. Many other people had gone to other directions. And within this time, we had one of the things we did the first year was republish this book called An African Abroad, which is an African classic travel writing by Olabisi Ajala. Everybody knows Ajala travel, but not many people know that he had written a book. So I came across this. I'd been obsessed with the book for a long time, and then I met the surviving widow of the man in Australia, and I convinced her to let us republish the book. So we did that under OlongoAfrica, and we did a number of other things. And so in 2024, Brickhouse then created a new platform called Flaming Hydra. This time we brought 60 new writers to. It's a subscription model. It's different from OlongoAfrica, which is public and accessible. A subscription model where 60 people write every month. Each person one article per month, and then would send it to anyone who wants to read them. I think a subscription of about $3 or so per month. And then we distribute the proceeds from that to every of the 60 people. So in short, the idea we had at Brickhouse is still sustained, which is that journalism is too important to leave to only people who have big media institutions like New York Times and the rest. As we can see, sometimes governments play too much in influence in what kind of things are written or how information is presented. But if you let journalism come to the hands of people who are doing it, and let the audience who are receiving it also be the ones who choose themselves to be able to receive and read what is being produced, then the direct conversation between the reader and the writer is facilitated without anybody, putting their finger on the scale to make it hard to happen. So that's what Flaming Hydra is doing. That's the value Brickhouse has. And that's what we also try to do at OlongoAfrica. So while Flaming Hydra is doing its thing, I still write there as well. OlongoAfrica now has transitioned into a kind of a research organization, both research and artistic conversations. So we got a grant last year, to do a film showing Ebrohimie Road. I assume you're going to talk about that. And last year we got a grant to explore Black Orpheus, the magazine, and do a few other things. And I got another grant to do another film, which I'm going to talk about much later. So that's what OlongoAfrica started as a magazine, as a place to explore and put things out there in the world, but it's grown into this community of like-minded people doing interesting things in literature, in arts, and documentation, basically.
That's very interesting. And I think
Yes.
I don't want to say this ahead of the time that I want to ask the question, but I think it's there's been this running thread in at least Nigerian literary history, or how will I call it, of like, the the collaboration of people from different disciplines to come together to make something. But more on that later. I actually came across OlongoAfrica at ArtX, the ArtX library last year.
That's
And I was like, oh, what's this? And then I'm looking and I'm seeing the Black Orpheus publication covers. And I'm like, what's okay? I recognize names here, but I don't know anything about this. So I went back and I tried to like search online, but you only find what you can find, like covers and everything like
Yes.
that. So I'm actually very happy about your mission to re-archive. Can you talk to me about? I know you've already stated that you got the grant for this a year ago, but can you talk to me about why this publication specifically?
Okay.
And yeah, just your intention.
Let me show you a few copies I have with me. This is this is issue number 2, published in
Yeah.
1958 or thereabout. I have all of them in a corner near me here.
Oh my
I
gosh,
have
that's so nice.
there's some of them in Nigeria as well. So Black Orpheus has interested me for a long time. I think I must have seen a copy of it when I was young with my parents, but I didn't care much for it at the time. It was just so many of the things that were around the house, books and arts and all of that. And then one day, I believe it was right before that British Library Fellowship, I got, like I said, I got a copy of it. And then when I was in London, I realized that at the British Library, you could order almost any book you wanted from the British Library record, and they will bring it up. Because I was then a member of staff, I had the staff ID. They bring it to my table in like less than 5 minutes. You go online and search. Usually, if you're a member of the library, you can order books. It might take hours or sometimes days. But if you're a staff member, I bring it up to your desk. And so I ordered Black Orpheus, and I saw all of them in great, beautiful copies that have been preserved over many years. I saw An African Abroad, the original copy. I saw Fagunwa's novels, Bojo Adenu Borumole, the original copies with
Wow.
the painting on cover. Like almost anything I could think of, because I grew up around books. My father had many of these books from the very, early 60s, 50s, 40s, etc. And by the time I grew up, many of them had either been destroyed or loaned away and lost and stolen, etc. That it was such an exciting time to be there and be able to see these books in your hands. And then I went to Nigeria shortly between the fellowship and before the time I came back finally. And I was curious to see what Nigerian libraries have as a record of many of these
Yeah.
publications. So I went to the National Library in Lagos. I asked them, do you have any publications from the 60s? They said no. They have only textbooks and modern novels and stuff like that. Do you have Black Orpheus magazines? They said they don't. Who might have it? They said, go to the Edike Library in UI and ask. I said, why? They said, anyway, they are usually National Library of Nigeria. If you publish a book in Nigeria, 5 copies are supposed to send to the Nigerian Library. They will keep one in the Edike Library, one in Abuja, and then maybe send the rest to different. They have 27 different branches around the country and send them there. So there must be a record. So I went to Edike Library, spoke to the librarian there. No idea where the Black Orpheus magazines were. And this is a magazine that was published in Nigeria. It started in 1957. It was first supported by the Ministry of Education in Ibadan. And it became one of the most significant artistic production of the time. He published Soyinka, published Achebe, published Okigbo, published Gabriel Okara, published all of those guys, published people from outside of the country, published Paul Thoreau, he published Jacob Lawrence, so many people.
Yeah.
Susan Wenger did all the covers. And this was something that felt personal to me. Ibadan was where I was born, it was where I grew up. And so I was really depressed by that kind of lack. And I did a write-up about it, finding how much the National Library collects every year. What have they been doing with it? The legal deposit law that exists that is supposed to help preserve every book published in Nigeria is not being enforced properly. Every book published in the UK, a copy is sent to the British Library and they have to keep it there. During the colonial times, they had the same legal deposit all over their colonies and their places they governed, including Nigeria, which was why they got many of the books before independence. So I understand why they have books pre-1960. But they have all the books even after 1960. What they do is once in a year or so, they send their curator around the world to visit different countries. Any book they see there that they don't have, they buy it. And they just bring it back to London and preserve it and keep it there. It's just such a simple thing. You don't lose anything by buying one copy of the book. Sometimes they even have 2 or 3 copies. And so I was very depressed about that. And I was wondering about what can I do to make sure that many of these publications, especially those that were published in my own country, in the spaces that I occupy, can be accessible to people who should benefit from it, who should have access to it. Imagine thinking a work of Soyinka was published in issue 5, 1959 or so. Some of his early poems were published there. Telephone Conversations, I think, was published around the same time. You can't find it anywhere else. In almost any Soyinka book, you won't find those poems there. The one is called The Immigrants, one is called The Other Immigrant. Even when he published his collection of poems, retrospective, he called it, 2 years ago, I looked into it and I couldn't find that poem. And I had to write to him there's this poem you published in 1959. This is a great poem. He should have been a part of it. He said he didn't know that it existed in Black Orpheus and he doesn't have records of that. There are many of these poems like that were published in small, sometimes obscure publications, and they don't have a record of it. So these are things that have been bothering me, why don't we have access to it? Why is it that you only have to travel abroad before you can have access to a Nigerian publication? They're published in Ibadan, for Christ's sakes. So at my personal expense, I started collecting. This is why my collection obsession started. Every book I can find that is important, I buy it. And they're very expensive. They get very expensive. The first Black Orpheus I bought, I think, was $50. Now, each of them costs about $1,500 for one copy. And so when in last year, I wrote this grant to Open Society and convinced them that it would be nice to be able to buy all the copies that exist now, even at that expense. And first, I wanted to digitize them to make sure people online, anybody, anywhere can have access to the content. And second, then make them available to scholars who then are interested in looking through them, because there's so much that we don't know that has gone past. Like I said, the review of Things Fall Apart was in Black Orpheus. how do people react to it? Many of the reviews of many of the books that are published in the 40s, 50s, 60s were in those pages. Sometimes art, sometimes photography, sometimes just reviews, sometimes even book excerpts. And so that was what we did. So they gave us $100,000 last year. And I bought all the copies I could find. We have now the complete set. So the exhibition you saw at Artex was the introduction to the fellowship.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure that first we'll showcase it so people can see the beauty in the covers, which is some of the most fascinating covers I've ever seen. And then, encourage people who wanted to apply for the fellowship. People have applied now, and we have selected 10 people. We're going to give them some money throughout the year. And each of them is looking at different aspects of the journal to interpret them in their own way. One person, Yadichima, is trying to redo the covers in her own style. She's a graphic, a visual artist, and she wants to be able to do a number of new designs. So this is another issue 2. This is 3. And I think this is another one.
This feels like such a privilege. I love it.
It's another one. And then many of them like that. So these are my own copy. The one we bought for Open Society in Lagos. So after we've scanned them, we are transferring them to a library, Guest Artist Foundation, a private library, but has security and all those things. So people can, if they want to, be able to go there and read and look through them and do whatever work they want to do. But then we also make the digital version available to anyone to use as well. So that is basically my thinking. And that's the work we've been doing. Again, it's a type of archiving, but also making information available to current generations so that they don't think that just because there has been a break in the conversation between the present and the past, that that things didn't happen. There's so much that happened in that time, and knowing them helps us understand the present so that we can create a different future.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you.
And like you recently directed and produced Ebrohimie Road. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
And I'm going to ask you a bit about I'm asking you why for all these things that you're doing, but I feel like it's just important to know. I know Wole Soyinka recently, last year at Freedom Park, they had an exhibition about him. And then seeing your documentary as well, I guess I'm wondering why you chose that aspect of his life to show.
You've seen the film, right?
I haven't seen it. Surprisingly, I'm like,
okay.
I couldn't see it when I was in Lagos. And then the more screening days came out after I traveled back. And I was like, okay. I wish I did though. If it's available somewhere, somehow, I would love to.
Yes. Okay. I'll send you a link. So, Ebrohimie Road started, again, an obsession. For some reason, many of my obsessions tend to eventually become fruitful in a way. I hadn't planned to do a film. I had no idea what goes into making films. I mean, I know the films I have loved, but I didn't have any idea about, how to go ahead making them. So in 2023, yes, I was in Lagos. Long before then, 2018, I got a fellowship, a scholarship to write a book about Soyinka. It was a fellowship by Morland Foundation. And it's a book, I still have a draft of it. It's a story exploring Soyinka's relationship with the forests and the bush. So in the research for the book, I came across this house where he had lived in the University of Ibadan. And it surprised me because I had gone to the University of Ibadan myself as a student between 2000 and 2005. And I had no idea that Soyinka had lived in that particular house. I knew he had lived in UIA. I knew that he had been a member of staff. I did not know the full details of why he left, even though he has written a little bit about it in different places. But knowing that the building he lived in was still there was very surprising. So I went there, I saw the building, I was very impressed. I saw this photo that was at the cover of this book about Enkare years. There's a photo of him sitting in front of a building with carvings around him. I had been obsessed with that photo for so long. So when I found out that it was the house where the photo was taken was in UI, I was so excited. So I went there, took some photos, and I left. Second time I went there, I met the person who lived there, who was an old teacher of mine, Professor Nelson Fashino. I took some pictures of him. I asked him questions, told him why I was interested in the place, that I was writing a book, and I went away. So I had that photo I took that day with me. I had not planned to use in a film. It was just there. So last 2023, I was in Lagos, and I met someone from Open Society Foundation who was touring Nigeria and meeting a lot of creative people. And they asked for different ideas that they were going to fund. I sent them a number of ideas of my language work and stuff. They were not quite impressed. They were not, at least they were not responding to me on time. So I said, Soyinka is going to be 90 next year. And this part of the book I was writing, the Ebrohimie Road, I was wanting to be nice to take Soyinka back there to like explore, relive the memory for the camera. You know, what was it like to live here? What do you remember, etc. Even though when I first asked Soyinka about this idea in 2018, he had said no, he doesn't want to go back to that house. But I still suggested to Open Society that, it'd be nice to get Soyinka that if you give me some money, I will do a 15 minutes film. Just a short tribute with Soyinka walking down the street and doing, talking to the camera. I didn't know whether he was going to say yes. I didn't know how he was going to do it, but I was just interested. Anyway, I didn't know they were going to say yes, but they did say yes. And they committed some money to that idea. And as soon as they did, I started, having sleepless nights. Like, oh my God, what have I got myself into now? I've committed a man whom, who had told me I was not coming there to an idea that I promised to do. So in that panic, I finally convinced Tunde Kelani to come on board, that I wanted to tell the story. He said, okay, let's ask Soyinka about it. So we went to Soyinka's office and I told him, he looked at the proposal, the one pager I wrote, and he said, I remember this now. You and I had this conversation. I said, I'm not going to Ibadan anymore. I'm like, I'm in trouble now. I'm not giving this money back, but I have to do something. So I started thinking of different ways I could do it. I asked him, would he be willing to at least sit down, talk to us about the Ebrohimie Road, whatever it is. You don't have to take you to Ibadan. We'll come to your house, wherever you are. Just give us. He said, that's fine. I'm like, okay, perfect. So I had to travel out of the country at the time. So we left that. He said he'll give us a time. And so that's how the project began. I just then started fleshing out, how would I tell the story since Soyinka is not coming? It ballooned from a 15-minute idea to a big feature film. In finding the people to interview, I realized that the story was actually much bigger than I thought it was. It concerned the Civil War, it concerned memory, it concerns family, it concerns Soyinka's time in Ibadan, actually when he taught at the university, because it turns out that 1967, he was appointed as the first director of the School of Drama, University of Ibadan. He started work there maybe for 1 or 2 months. Then he went to Biafra because the war started to visit his friends, Cuneo Italy, and the rest. When he came back, he was arrested. And he was in jail for like 2.5 years. By the time he came out of prison, he got back to his department. He found that the department, because of pressure from the university, the authorities, and many other intrigues, had decided that they wouldn't make him the head of the department anymore, or they won't confirm him as professor. So there were a lot of intrigue. So like a few more months after, he left Ibadan. So it turned out that even though tenure says he was head of the department from 1967 to 1971, he actually didn't spend much time there. So I wanted to explore that space. Why was he fired? He resigned. Why did he resign? What were the real causes of his resignation? He had written about it. Again, he didn't say so much, but he was, expressed his anger. So I found people who were in UI at the time to give some recollection. I found some of his students, some people who are just UI administrative people, to speak a bit to that expression. But again, it turned out that I was living in Ebrohimie Road at the time when this happened. So Ebrohimie Road now has connected to this time in UI as the first director of drama. Has connected to the Civil War because he was arrested there. And then I found out that his wife, who lived there while Soyinka was in prison, remained there after Soyinka left for exile, because he went on exile in 1971. He didn't come back to Ibadan. He came back in 1974, so he got to University of Ife and just stayed there. And then he retired from Ife in 1985, and then he got the Nobel Prize in 1986. So all the time he left for Ibadan, his wife remained in Ibadan. Left for Ife. His wife remained in Ibadan, raising the kids, doing her own work as a librarian. So that also interested me. This woman whom we knew a little bit about, but we haven't really met as a person. I wanted to talk to her. It took a while. She said no many times, and eventually she said yes. And so we wanted to check her own career and how she, married Soyinka, what she endured during those times, and the fact that she stayed there for all this period. And then we found the children who gave us, beautiful recollections of what Ebrohimie Road was like when they lived there, what they became over the years. And then the current person who lives there now tells us about what the university has been doing. Sometimes they, giving part of the land away to other people. Sometimes they wanted to remove the building and set up a shopping complex. And so there's a complex connectedness of
Yeah.
memory, of history, of ecology, the fact that, greenery, what UI used to be in those days, what it is now, how we maintain our history, how we preserve what is important, how we tell the stories of the people who matter to us, and why, UI today, Ebrohimie Road is something nobody remembers until a film brought it back to life. I mean, a number of people knew about it, but I went to UI, I didn't know, which means that several people don't know that the place exists as a place of history. And so using the film as a way to memorialize that building was something that became an overwhelming desire at the beginning of the film. And thankfully, we're able to put all of this together thanks to the crew, the volunteers, and the subjects who we got to interview, including the key members of Soyinka family and Soyinka himself and the wife. So that's basic summary of Ebrohimie Road.
Yeah. That's I want to watch that now. And
Yes.
like it's just adding to the archive that
Mm-hmm.
I think is so important, because I have this question. Going back to Lagos, and I know over a couple of years, recent years, I've seen that many people in Nigeria are trying to reconcile the the gap, let's say, between like cultural productions in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even 90s, like down to
Mm-hmm.
as far back and or as close as you can remember,
Mm-hmm.
to the seeming absence with reckoning with that history today. My first
Mm-hmm.
question is, why is there why is that gap there? Like, whether it's a, I don't know, maybe sometimes conscious erasure or not. I'm just very intrigued as to why there's just
It's a
this.
very good question. It's a very good question. It's something I think about myself. The most obvious one, of course, is that there are some parts of our history that is contentious because many of the people who were villains are still alive and they don't want to be written as villains, even though they are villains. And so when you think about the Nigerian Civil War, for instance, why is it not a subject already in Nigerian textbooks? Why is it not a subject in high school syllabus where we can
Yeah.
tell exactly what happened, who did what, why, when, and what's the consequence of what they did? So part of what the film actually tries to do as well is to first put the facts on the table, especially this time through a personal, individual story, showing cast time in UI. The people who were sitting on his appointment and promotions committee who decided that Soyinka was not, at the time they said, he was not mature enough, so to speak, to be a professor, a full professor in the university, or that his work, even though he had done a lot of interesting theater work that was already reviewed positively everywhere in the world, that it wasn't worth giving a professorship or the chair in the department of UI in Ibadan because of either their personal animosity, jealousy, or they just didn't understand how his work, exists, are still around, and many of them are still in the university. There was one of them I wanted to interview, and he said, "No, go and read my book. Anything you find there is what we have. We're not going to talk on the screen." So there is that resistance to being portrayed in a way they know for sure it's not going to be positive because they know what they did. So hopefully, as many of them transition, um, work like this will remain as a way to interrogate the stories.
Yeah.
I hope many people continue to do more work like this. I wrestled a lot with how much space to give the Civil War in the film because it was a crucial part. And Soyinka again connected to the Civil War half of the time. He was supposed to be in Ibadan. He was locked up. But also, there were other aspects of the story that needed attention as well, including the personal and many things we didn't already know. Civil War, there's a lot of books around it, even though not enough documentaries, at least from Nigerian perspectives. So I see that it's true. We haven't reckoned enough with our history, and the people who had the power to do it refused. They removed history from subjects in high school so that we don't get to do these things. So while that's a problem, we have the medium of film, of writing. Chimamanda wrote Half of a Yellow Sun. Achebe wrote his There Was a Country. Soyinka has written a lot of memoirs. Babangida is writing his fake biography as well. There will always be people giving stories, and hopefully the more stories come out, the more we're able to listen to different perspectives and come to the truth of what it is. the benefit of film and other creative endeavors is we can, through the portrayal, sometimes fictional or even real events, we can come to an emotional truth that can tell us much more than what textbooks or
Yeah.
curated government lines can tell.
Yeah. Yes, hopefully. And
Hopefully.
I'm looking yes, I'm looking forward to more of these stories and histories. It's
Yeah.
been on my mind quite recently.
Yeah,
But
and we
I
all
like the
have
fact that
personal stories. Is the conversation we have almost at every screening is people finding out that there's so many stories around them, their own parents, friends, their grandparents. Even while doing the film, we got about 16, 17 hours of audio of interviews, and we couldn't use all of it because there's so many different directions the movie could have gone, and there's several stories of different people. That I think you know all of us have stories and we need to get them recorded, especially
yeah,
because we're losing many of our heroes or many of our elders, and there's so much they could tell us that could help us at least understand the past to be able to then
yeah.
live better in the future. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying something
No,
else.
no, it's good. It's basically what you're saying of like the different histories, different stories, and I like the fact that it's so nuanced and different, and it's coming from different people. I think before now I was kind of the opinion that it just has to come from maybe one source. Someone should just summarize everything for us in a way that makes sense. But knowing that it's coming from different people speaks to the complexity of a nation's, if you think of a nation's history and the role
Yeah.
that everybody plays in that in informing it. So
Yes. Yes.
I'm happy
Yes.
for that.
The film
Um
is on Vimeo, by the way, but I'll send you a link. If you
oh,
Google
okay.
Ebrohimie
Yes,
Road
okay, that's good.
Vimeo,
Yes,
you'll
please.
be able to
And
see
yes, I'll
it.
look for it as well. I want to go to I'm going to ask this question first and then go back to the Black Orpheus Restoration Project. What makes, let me start like this. At the center of thoughts, at the center of expressions, I've always found that Nigerian literature does something that I don't find any other kind of literature doing. When I read a fiction or whatever genre that it might be, even outside of books, poetry and other things like that, is something very interesting. I think it is a vessel for cultural transformation, like it's a way to shape society. And it has always intrigued me that African literature can speak to so much. When you put it beside African cultural heritage, when you put it beside contemporary, like it just speaks to so much. So I want to ask, as a linguist yourself and as someone who is interested in this, what makes Nigerian literature so potent to shape a society? why is why is the blueprints for cultural transformation defined and freed in the world of literature? What makes literature, Nigerian literature, so you know?
I think it's just the thing with literature itself. It's not just Nigerian literature itself, but I see how, because you are a Nigerian and I'm a Nigerian, Nigerian literature speaks to us because it speaks
Yeah,
a language we understand. It speaks to a culture we are familiar with, and it speaks to aspirations and limitations and things that we wrestle with every day. I assume that if an American is doing an American literary work, they also feel the same way. But the conversations that we keep having, Chibe and Chinka and the rest of them have had it as well, which is that how do we tell an authentic African story? What makes an authentic African story? Is it less authentic just because it's in English, or does it need to exist in a local language before it's an authentic African story? And the people who have been writing and the examples of the work we've seen has shown us that it can be everything, it can be all of those things, depending on how we carry the story that we're telling. It's the story that is most important. Of course, along with the medium of telling it, but it's the audience that determines whether the story reaches them, no matter what language you use. But literature has always done that, even before the printing, press. We have had, Ijala, we've had Tadakwada, we've had, Apala, we've had all these other ways of expressing ourselves with creativity, to entertain, to inform, to educate, which is why a number of people also mention that literature is not all in all. Orature is also very, very relevant, especially for African societies. For instance, I know that every time every time I listen to an Odolaya Remu album, he's a Nijala, a Dadakwada artist who died, a number of years ago. There's a way it transports me back to a part of myself that I can't reach anywhere else. Same thing with listening to Ayinla Omowura or Aruna Ishola, or even Barista or Kolinton. Each of them have something in them, a kind of literature in the oral expressions that speaks to a part of you. So it depends on what kind of person are you, how did you grow up, what kind of influence did you have as a child. There's some songs you listen to, even songs from the 90s, African Coin Two-Face. Yeah, there's some way it does you, it takes you back to a certain place at a certain time. So I think literature does that for people whose primary means of engaging with the world is the written word. Literature does that much more than anything else. But for many Africans who also have varying ways of engaging with the world, or the questions of who we are and how we got here, there's a lot more than literature. We have orature, we have poetry, we have the beauty of words, how you craft them, how you speak them, even proverbs, even the way our parents speak to us or speak to themselves in front of us, etc. Those are just African culture is a rich one, and we have all these different means of expression and being in the world that's available to us. Thankfully, we have writers who also kind of harness much of that and bring it into their written world. So that, I think, is a benefit to many people who read our writers from outside of the continent, who would read some line and like, what does it mean? And even in the not understanding the full depth of where the word or sentence or phrase comes from, they still engage with the creativity and the beauty in how it's expressed. What's this movie? They play Death and the King's Horseman. I've seen people talk about it, who are not Yoruba at all, but who still get the exact, catharsis from that kind of story of clash of, of duty and that Eleshonpa had to go through to do his work. So yeah, literature is interesting. African literature is beautiful, and thankfully we have writers doing their work to make it even more interesting.
Yeah. And now back to the Black Orpheus Restoration Project. Hey.
Yes.
You spoke about it earlier, but maybe let me just ask again. What is there what is the plan now? Having acquired these publications, what is the plan for the previous issues and what is the plan for the future?
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, and as far as the funding we have for this year goes, I've acquired all the editions I could find, all the 22 original editions from first, the volume 1 were edited by Ulibaya. We have them in Lagos. Volume 2, we have all of them. I think there were 3 or so copies, edited by JP Clark and Abiola Irele. And then volume 3, I think there were 3 copies as well. We have that. The volume 4 were edited by a man called Theo Vincent. We have only found a scanned copy, just one, at the British Library. I don't have a physical copy. I'm still looking for it. The number of editions published of Wonder Volume 4, which we haven't found, because, again, they're lost somewhere. So they're somebody's library, rotting away, or in a private hand somewhere in the West. We hope to get all of that. Volume 5, we have one copy. Volume 6, we have 1 copy. And then the journal stopped publishing in 94 after the Volume 6. So all the ones we have, we will make them available in the library, like I said. We have a loan agreement in place now with Guest Artist Foundation in Lagos. We will make the digitized archive available first to the fellows we chose and those who applied for the fellowship so that they can engage with it and do whatever work they want to do. We publish those work on OlongoAfrica. And then much later, we make the digitized edition available to everyone, so everyone can do whatever they want to do with it. My aim long term, I was hoping to do it this year, but I realized I can't do it with all the work I have engaged with, is to find a way to bring Black Orpheus back as a journal, as a magazine that can engage current contemporary writing, art, visual art, creative production. To do that, we need to know where the current right resides. Like I said, it was first sponsored by the Ministry of Education in Ibadan. It moved, I think, to Mbari Club. I think Longman's published it for a while. and then University of Lagos. So who has the ultimate say into whether we can still continue to use the name Black Orpheus? That would be interesting to know. And then we'll find an institution to be able to work with to keep the magazine back alive. Like Transition Magazine was published in the 70s around the same time, but it now exists under the Hutchinson Center, the Harvard University, and it's published almost every month, every 6 months. I can't remember. So I want an opportunity to be able to do the same for Black Orpheus, where it remains as an institution. A lot of rotating editors work on it. We get a consistent grant every year or funding or ways to make it sustainable, and then create it as a venue for more people to be able to write and publish and do interesting work. But meanwhile, all the editions we have, hopefully it's accessible forever to anyone who is interested in reading and learning about the past.
Music to my ears. I love that, being able to access
Yes.
previous issues, but also the plan for the future, because it's a way to continue and to continue to record the what is going on now. And I have to think about it like this, that everybody that writes, comments on culture or critiques something or is making work now, they are archiving the present. And that's very
Yes,
important,
exactly.
that we get this one right,
Yes.
so that future
Yes.
generations have something to fall back on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope
But
that works. Yeah.
thank you so much for your time, Kola. This has been so good. Thank you for showing me the publications. That was really nice.
Oh, good.
That's a
good.
privilege
They're
I
so
keep.
beautiful. They're so beautiful. It's just
They are.
sometimes I'm tempted to, like, if maybe scan them and then put them on large frames and hang them around the house.
Yeah.
But you can't remove the cover now. You damage the whole thing. So
Yeah.
just keeping them so sacred in a good place in the house.
Yes.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time. To our viewers, you can follow Kola's work on his website and OlongoAfrica on Instagram. I'm going to put both of those things in the description box so that you have access to that.
Thank
And
you.
stay tuned for more episodes.
And they can watch Ebrohimie Road on Vimeo now. Yes, just Google Ebrohimie Road Vimeo. You should be able to find the link to it.
Did you hear that? You can watch Ebrohimie Road on Vimeo. Please go and watch it. And I'm
Thank
going
you
to
so
do
much.
so as well. We'll watch it
Thank
together.
Thank you very much.
But thank you so much for your time.
Have a nice day.
You too. Bye.
Them no say we day, we come night and day. Sister pave the way, so I no hesitate. Brother tell me say, make I no come exclaim. Cause this gist it day, yes this gist it day.